Hello and welcome to my channel Past the Fog, where I try to teach others and educate others on the tactics of sociopaths and narcissists that are used on their targets to gain the upper hand against the target in a situation or an abusive situation. And today I'm going to be talking about one of the tactics that abusers use called stonewalling. Stonewalling is not talked about that much, but it can cause great distress in another person, and it can be catastrophic for a situation because stonewallers don't communicate. And so there's a huge breakdown in communication, which can leave the target feeling very isolated. And stonewallers, you know, they can seem like pillars of the community. They can seem like wonderful, kind people, but still, it's not that they're not these things in many ways. They can be wonderful to other people, but you have been targeted by them. They are still an abusive person. You have been targeted by them because they view you as a threat, or they have in some way, you know, they want power over you. They want power and control over you, so they use stonewalling to get what they want. And so they don't have any desire to communicate because they believe whatever they think is happening or whatever they heard. They will demand that you understand them, other people understand them. They'll get angry at other people if they don't sit down with them and understand an entire situation from their perspective. They demand grace and understanding. They will not give it to their target, however. So, excuse the phone, it's ringing. Anyway, they will not give grace and understanding to their target, and they will get angry if other people have. But still, like I said, they seem like wonderful people in the community. And so if you say that person has been abusing me and running a smear campaign on me and so forth, very few people will actually even believe you because they seem like decent people, you know. In my situation, you know, I do have a group of people that do believe me, but I think in a lot of situations people aren't believed. So, okay, so stonewalling consists of refusal to negotiate a conflict in good faith. They refuse to negotiate a conflict in good faith. It is their way or the highway. It is the way they are seeing it or no other way. Remember, they're going to walk around saying there are two sides to a story. There are two sides to a story, to create doubt in other people's minds regarding you and regarding what you're saying. But they're not going to say a whole lot other than that because they want to come across as the good people who aren't gossiping. So, but you know how they operate. So number 2, refusal to discuss honestly one's motivations. They are extremely dishonest, but they're going to say you are. And maybe you have been dishonest a little, and you're going to admit it. And then they're going to use it against you. So these people that use these abuse tactics, they're double binding you almost. They want you to confess and admit to anything you've done wrong in the situation or any mistakes you've made. And then they're going to exaggerate those mistakes. And then they're going to deny that they're doing them themselves, but 10 times more. And so they're not willing to discuss honestly their motivations for doing many things in the situation. Number 3, refusal to listen to another point of view with openness. They just won't. They're extremely prideful, extremely self-righteous, but they're going to say you are. They're going to flip it around and say you're the one that's like that, even though you know, and everyone that knows you knows, that that's not what you're like. You're like open, you're reasonable, you're not impossible to deal with, you want to understand other people's point of views, you want to talk it out, you want to be the peacemaker, but they're not going to allow you to be the peacemaker because they're going to portray you as the instigator. They're going to portray you as someone that you're not. They're going to portray you as themselves. Okay, they refuse to compromise. They refuse to collaborate. They refuse to support the other person's plans and refusal to accept influence. Stonewalling is a complete pattern of non-communication and non-cooperation that only works from a position of power. So this person wants total power over you, total power of how the narrative comes out, total power over the situation, like I said. And they are very uncooperative people. They're uncooperative. They're usually rebels. They do not like authority. They only like people that agree with them. They're not going to say this, by the way. They're going to say that's not true. I have 3 little memes here that I got off the internet. They're just little, if you're watching and you want to be educated on stonewalling, I'll just read them to you real quick. This is what stonewallers do and how it affects the abused person. When narcissists and sociopaths refuse to discuss certain matters, they use a tactic known as stonewalling, aka the silent treatment, not to be confused with no contact, initiated by the victim in order to protect ourselves from further abuse. It's completely different. It's the silent treatment. It is a form of control, manipulation, and punishment. This makes their victim extremely anxious and desperate for any kind of response. The victims will even say that they are wrong and will apologize, whatever the narcissist or sociopath demands. That was written by Gina Da Silva. So many of you who've been on the other end of stonewalling, maybe you overly humbled yourself and now it's being used against you. Maybe you kept apologizing and now they're saying, yes, it is all your fault. You need to forgive yourself, or something like this. They are very, the thing is, stonewalling is used to make the victim anxious and desperate for any kind of response. So we completely fall apart. We're trying so hard. Will you please listen to me? Will you please communicate with me? But they have no desire to. They want power over you. We'll even admit to things that we're not even guilty of, you know. Or it seems like that, you know, we'll be over admitting things, we'll be over humbling ourselves, we'll be over trying to make things right just because we're so desperate for communication with the stonewaller. Now, maybe not all of you have done that, but I know some of you probably have, where you feel like a fool now looking back and realizing, oh, that person was using me. Oh, and the other people in the dynamic were too. And then you feel like, oh, yeah, so stonewalling is a tactic commonly used by bullies to control the situation and to isolate, humiliate, and frustrate a target who attempts to resolve a conflict through reasonable discussion or negotiation, accusing the target of mental deficiency, harassment, or even bullying. So they're going to flip it around, even though they are the ones that have issues. The stonewaller I was dealing with, once again, nice person. Also paranoid, aggressive, covertly passive-aggressive, and had to get what he thought was true out. He had to push out what he thought was true. He was not willing to discuss anything. He was not willing to, he pretended to be the good guy in one sense. He was lying in some ways, and so he was a very difficult person to deal with. It's kind of a double bind. Like, they put you in a situation where you just kind of, you can't win with them. You can't win no matter what you do. They're determined to blame you for everything and get you to blame yourself for everything. I believe that sociopathic and narcissistic abuse is a type of witchcraft. I think I really do. I think it's probably one of the most evil things. I know many of you watching this would agree. It is probably one of the most evil and mind-boggling experiences that somebody can go through. It's crazy. So they will accuse the target of mental deficiency, harassment, or even bullying, and other methods of asserting dominance, intimidations, and they will use other methods of asserting dominance, intimidating the target, and discouraging objections to mistreatment and exposure. So they want to they want to expose you for being who they are. That's the irony. They have somehow, you know, if you're the victim of a smear campaign, they have somehow painted you as them. You are simply reacting to them. You are afraid of more abuse. You are doing things so you won't be abused more. You're afraid of them. You are trying to protect yourself somehow, but they're misunderstanding text, but they won't talk to you about it. They'll stonewall you. Not all of them, but the one I was dealing with, actually, there was like a little cluster of people that, I think I've mentioned this in other videos, but I do think that these people are sometimes attracted to each other out in nature. Like you'll have a situation where you'll have a borderline and a covert narcissist and a malignant narcissist all together, or a sociopath all together in a situation, and they will target one person, and it's usually somebody who is nothing like them. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to say that as like we are awesome, wonderful people that get targeted. I'm just saying that, you know, we all are flawed humans, you know, but most people don't think in their minds, how can I destroy another person and another person's perception and reality? How can I undermine that person throughout an entire situation so that I can look good and they can look bad? How can I paint that person in the worst possible light and get that person to self-destruct while I lift myself up as judge and jury over that person and portray myself as the savior and the wonderful human being that in their own minds they think they are, but they are filled with power, control, and manipulation. Those three things they use against people. And stonewalling is just one of the other tactics that they use. Here's one more meme for you. A common tactic in toxic relationships is stonewalling, or using silence as a form of manipulation. Example, a survivor confronts a toxic person with how their actions have hurt them. And rather than address the issue, the toxic person pulls away and says nothing. This happened to me. I kept approaching this toxic person, and he would just say, oh, we don't need to talk. He'd turn, or he'd be like, I don't really have time right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if we could just have 5 minutes, this could be resolved, and all this pain and all this misunderstanding would go away. But because you will not give me 5 minutes, I mean, your whole life can end up destroyed because of one person's pride. And like I said, they demand grace and understanding for themselves. They don't give it to other people. And they get mad at other people if they've given it to you. But they won't give it to you. It's just a very frustrating situation. This is done, so let me back up. A survivor confronts a toxic person with how their actions have hurt them, and rather than address the issue, the toxic person pulls away and says nothing. This is done to try and invalidate the survivor's feelings, and most importantly, to help the toxic person avoid any responsibility for their actions. These people have the most fragile self-esteems. Their egos are I mean, that's part of the disorder, is their egos are so fragile. You can hardly say anything to them without them getting upset, crying. It's just like, what? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, most of the time, I could go to somebody and be like, you know, I've kind of noticed that you have this issue, or, you know, this part of you has been blah, 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 or this, what you said, blah, 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 hurt me. Most people would then turn around and say, oh gosh, I didn't realize that. I'm really sorry. And these people cannot handle any criticism, any. Their egos are extremely, extremely fragile. So if that means they have to make up an entire story on their target that is almost completely fabricated, then they will. And they'll use things you have said out of context. They'll, you know, the things you've said out of context, or they'll twist it to mean what they want it to mean instead of understanding what you meant when you said it, because they think they're mind readers. Stonewallers often do. They think they're mind readers. It's just a very frustrating situation, and I just think the more that we as a society helps educate our society on the tactics used against survivors of sociopathic and narcissistic abuse. I mean, I know people don't want to use those words. I say sociopath to people and they're like, well, you're not a psychologist. How can you diagnose blah, blah, blah? Oh, you're not how do you know they're a blah, blah? Well, the thing is, once you're in a dynamic with one, you realize you don't really realize what's happening for a while. And then you're so distraught and you're so thrown. You're in so much confusion, fear, obligation, guilt, all these feelings they're producing in you, that we start researching it, don't we? What is happening to me? Why am I self-destructing? Why are they saying these things about me? Blah, 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 How did this happen to me? So we start to research, and then we come across these personality disorders, and we're like, oh. And I mean, it's like they have a playbook, and they all do the same things. Because I've come across other people that are survivors, and they're like, yes, they did that, and we're all like, yes, that's exactly what happened to me. This. All the same tactics were used, or many of the same tactics were used, depending on, if you're just dealing with one or two or three. Sometimes I had a situation where I had many different tactics used against me at the same time to gain power, control, and manipulation over me. So I know pretty much all the tactics they use to do that, because, as I said, I do believe it is a very crafty form of witchcraft. I hate to use that word, but that is what it certainly feels like. It causes a great deal of, they want you to self-destruct. It's like a demonic attack almost. It's horrible. That's the only way I can describe it. So I hope this video has helped you in some ways to understand just another method that they use, that some of them use against us to gain control over us and a situation. Now, I want to just add that the person that was using stonewalling against me was a sociopath. So I don't know if you're dealing with a narcissist. I don't know if all narcissists do this, but I was dealing with narcissists too, but that person was not using stonewalling against me. Initially, later on, that person was, but sociopaths, at least the one that I dealt with, I'm just curious if you have dealt with a sociopath. Was there stonewalling involved? Please comment below and just let me know. That's what I experienced. So I hope this video has been helpful for you, and I hope that you are recovering from your trauma with these people, and that you're able to grow and heal and become the person you were before. Well, we may never be the person we were before this trauma, but come back to who you were a little bit and grow and thrive and help, and hopefully we will all become better people than we were before. And hopefully we will not be bitter and angry, but that we will become even more compassionate and more empathetic in our lives. Okay, so hang in there and keep educating yourself, and I really hope all of you watching this are able to get the support you need in surviving the dynamics between yourself and a sociopath, or yourself and a borderline, or yourself and a covert narcissist. And especially if you're dealing with a malignant narcissist, I really hope you're able to get the help you need, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Okay, hang in there, and God bless. Bye.